listening to the HR Mixtape, your podcast with the perfect mix of practical advice, thought-provoking interviews, and stories that just hit different so that work doesn't have to feel, well, like work. Now, your host, Shari Simpson.
Joining me today is Margaret Godwin. She is the HR Technology Consulting Practice Leader at Highland, specializing in strategic HR solutions. She holds a master's in HR Management and Personnel Administration, bringing expertise in aligning technology with workforce needs. Margaret, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast with me.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So I'd love if we could start with learning a little bit more about you, your work, and your passion in this space.
Yeah, of course. So I spent the first 15 years of my career with Hewitt Associates, now Alight, focused on all things benefit administration, technology, operations, and my client base was the large market enterprise size clients. And then I shifted focus completely opposite almost to SMB HR technology consulting for the past 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a cool space to be in, because I feel like you are at a unique position to help HR professionals make better choices, for sure. So let's start there. We're going to talk about HCM and basically how you select one. So as you think about the solutions that you're providing in the consultation you provide, what are some of the biggest factors that are critical for HR professionals to really consider as they're selecting an HCM for their organization?
Yeah, of course. I say you have to start with your needs and your wants. So in what I do in helping companies evaluate HR technology, it first starts with that discovery process. If you want to just go out and see what else is out there, okay, that's one thing. But if you really want to evaluate a system that you might adopt, you got to start with that discovery process. So looking at what do you need, what do you want, what's a nice to have, involving all the stakeholders in that conversation, right? So the managers, senior level managers, maybe tenured employees, of course, on the HR administration side. So you have to go through that and document. So then you use that, or I use that then to go to the vendor market and help see what's a good fit.
What are some things that HR professionals miss when they're thinking about this process? I mean, I've gone through it a couple times in my career where I selected a new HCM, and inevitably there is something that I just assumed was table stakes in the software I was selecting. Come to find out it wasn't. And then I'm kind of backpedaling a little bit. So I suspect there's other HR professionals who have done the same thing.
Yeah. One of the biggest things I see companies miss is just the time and the effort it takes in the evaluation. They just think maybe, it's like art. I'll know it when I see it. And that'll be the system. But I'd say give yourself at least 6 to 8 weeks comfortably in the SMB space to do this evaluation. And that evaluation includes many phases. The discovery, the demos can take 1 or 2 rounds, the proposals, talking to references, kicking the tires, as they say. So definitely don't underestimate that selection side process. And then when it comes to making assumptions as far as what the package includes, I think oftentimes the service model is often kind of forgotten about. You just think, this new system will come with XYZ service model, and the vendor will do all the heavy lifting. But you really got to ask about that up front of the vendors you're looking at. What's your service model? Does it meet your expectations and what you need or not? And
how do you go about testing integrations? You hear a lot like, we've got this or we've got that, but you don't necessarily always get to test it in advance. So how do you know it's going to work?
Yeah, of course. This is such a loaded topic because there's so many different levels of integration. And oftentimes I talk to clients that they say, I want everything integrated real time. And I just, in my role as consultant, have to do some expectation setting and level setting. Like that might not exist. So again, going back to documenting their wants and needs, I first challenge the company or the client to say, what systems are in your ecosystem? What level of integration needs to exist between those different systems? Is it real time? Does it have to be, all the fields? Does it have to be 1 or 2 ways? So first it goes back to documenting what you need, and then really putting that set of requirements in front of the vendors you're talking to and saying, okay, these are the systems we have. What is your current experience with integrating with these systems? Is it open API? Is it part of your marketplace? Because you're right, you can't really test an integration, but you can really get a sense for that vendor's level of experience with this other company. And what I often tell clients is the limitation often exists not on the HCM side, but on the other vendor side. So make sure you're looking at both sides of the equation to make sure that that fit is what you expect it to be in the end.
Well, that's such a good point, because I don't know that even I would have considered thinking about the thing I'm trying to integrate and seeing what output they have. I would just kind of put that all on the HCM vendor. So that's such a good point.
Yeah, it takes two to tango, as they say. So you got to look at it from both sides, both in terms of cost of the integration and effort to build it. Because what I tell clients a lot of times is, yes, this all sounds good in theory, integrations, but oftentimes it can be more trouble than it's worth if it costs too much. Integrations are prone to breaking sometimes, or if you happen to change, like in the example of benefits administrators, carriers, every couple years, you just have to take that into consideration.
Yeah, how do they set up your EDI feeds and stuff like that to make sure that it all flows? When you get into that demo, so let's say you've narrowed it down, you want to do a demo with, 3 to 5 vendors, you know that the demo is going to be the best of the best of the best that they have. That's what they want to show. That's what we want to show at Paylocity, obviously, when we walk in a room. As an HR person, how do I put on that really critical hat and ask those tough questions in the demos and push? What are some things that we should be asking in those moments?
Yeah. So in advance of those demos, I like to give my clients a little kind of pep talk or preview for what to do in those demos. I say, don't just sit there and be wowed by the system, because you're right, it's going to be the best of the best. But I tell them when they go into it, the couple weeks leading up to the demo, just have like a notepad next to your desk. Like, what are my pain points that I'm dealing with on a regular basis? And then when you get to those demos, it's really on you as the client to see enough of the system that you know that it can or can't address those day-to-day needs. So I tell clients, take your time. I know the vendor community will be happy to show you as much as you need to see, because they want it to be a mutually good fit as well. So it's set up for success. So I say, ask the questions that give you enough, proof really to tell you whether or not the system can meet those day-to-day situations.
Yeah, one of the things that I did in a past role is we actually had a really unique PTO plan. We had something separate in our salary group, something separate in our hourly group. And the tool that I was using at the time couldn't do that, right? So it was a lot of manual work. And so going into the demo evaluations that I did, I wanted them to show me how that actually would work. Now, granted, it's not my data that they're using, but they can demo with their fake data. And it was very eye-opening to go from, yes, we can do that, to show me how it's done, to find out that it was a little bit manual still because we had a really unique plan. But I would not have uncovered that if I had not pushed the vendor at that time to get really nitty-gritty and show me how it's done.
Yeah. They owe that to you. If you end up going with them, you're going to be paying a lot of money for this system. And PTO is a great example, because I've seen some crazy PTO policies out there. So when I'm talking to a client, at least half of the time I'm saying, can you send me your PTO policy? Because I want to take a look at it.
Yeah.
Because within a couple seconds, I'll be able to tell whether it's way off the wall or not. And that I like to provide that to the vendor to get ready for the demo. Because you're right. You gotta see that stuff.
Well, and that's just one complexity. If you're working with maybe a union or a municipality that's got shift work that's really unique, that is governed by specific state laws, and you have salaried non-exempt employees who also potentially get what's called 7G pay. There's a lot that's there. So you do have to know the landscape of your business to ask the right questions, because you do not want to implement something that creates more work for you, obviously.
And if you have something that complex, that is another great example. Me as the HR administrator or whoever's evaluating the system, I want the vendors to bring those SMEs to the table so I can ask those questions. So oftentimes we'll get into demos and poor sales rep is simply regurgitating whatever answer he or she got from that tax SME or that government SME, and I'm just like, bring them to the meeting if possible. I know it's hard sometimes.
How have you coached HR leaders to bring employees into this process? I'm seeing more of that now than I have ever seen in my career. I think it's fantastic, especially as we think about employee experience and technology adoption and some of those things. What's your recommendation there?
I would say, as you're thinking about what you want in a new system. You could do something as simple as a survey 6 months in advance of your demos. Just send out a pulse survey to employees. What do you love? What do you not love about the current system? What are some things that could really make your life easier? So just open those lines of communication so that they can give you some input and feedback there. And then when it comes to the demos and the evaluations, bringing some of those senior level managers or employees to the demos. One great example is I helped a hospital recently, and they literally brought some of those nurse managers in because they're the ones that are scheduling and checking time cards. And so, bring them in because they're the ones that are going to tell you if it's going to work or not.
Especially if you know it's going to be a big change management project for you. Something as simple as, hey, right now the tool we use, it takes 2 clicks to clock in or clock out, and the new tool is actually going to take 4 clicks. That might be a deal breaker for your employees from their experience. That they might hate that, or it might be a win depending upon, kind of the flow of their work or stuff. But you wouldn't know that as an HR person because you're probably not doing that task daily.
No. And that is another great example. We hear about the line that's, leading up to the time clock. It takes so long to clock in that there's a line and now I'm late for my shift. But you as HR, you might not know that employees are dealing with those things and that they have to come 30 minutes before their shift just to clock in and out. So definitely get their input.
How do you see the role of AI? And I feel like I'm asking everybody this question now. AI and machine learning really evolving in the context of HCM software. And the reason I said both AI and machine learning is because I think right now there is so much conversation about AI, but a lot of what's already built into HCM tools is algorithms that is giving us things that we kind of consider AI, but we're not quite there on things where we're in that true AI space. It'll come, but we're seeing kind of the gamut, but I think it's all getting labeled as AI.
Right. AI. What a hot topic right now.
Right?
To say the least. I tell clients they're both, they're excited about it and the potential, but they're also just nervous about what does this mean for employees and my job and all of that. I encourage clients to just first think about what's your strategy around AI. Some companies, honestly, I help the 100 life potato farmers, they don't really work. They're not worried about AI. Yeah. But if you're in the type of business where it really could help you, first have to think about your strategy at a top level and then make sure your company and every employee knows what that strategy is, so you don't just have employees going rogue on using AI in their day-to-day job. And really for HR, you're going to be the ones that are developing the training around how you leverage AI tools or not. So that's just sort of at a high level how I think companies need to think about going into AI. I mean, as far as using it on a day-to-day level right now, at least what I'm seeing with HCMs is AI is really going to help employers look at a lot of data, help notice trends, sort of be that eyes and ears everywhere, because these HCMs, they're holding a ton of data for the entire employee life cycle, from hire to retire. On the recruiting side, you're looking at massive amounts of applications and analyzing candidates and their potential fit, although proceed with caution there, right? With all the bias and everything. You can't just blindly trust the AI recommends this is the candidate you should choose. Just make sure you use AI as a tool and a possible data aggregator to help you kind of pick up on things. But in the end, HR and people have to be the ones to make the final decisions and live with them.
Yeah. I was talking to one of our employees actually before you came over to record, and we were talking about the AI landscape and how there's so many sessions here at HR Tech around AI. And the conversation led to it's great and it's not great if it doesn't actually help the HR professional do their job better. We remember years ago when it was big data, right? We got to get into the data. We got some cool dashboards out of that, but I don't know that we got the upskill that we really needed to evaluate data differently and really become predictive and learn how to do that. I'm hoping that AI is going to get us closer to those kinds of things so that it can help surface information for us that we can provide strategic solutions for. rather than it's just one more gimmick, one more, flashy thing.
Yeah, 1000%. So yes, big data was the buzz for the longest time and predictive analytics. But I think the challenge for the everyday HR practitioner was just not digestible data. Like you might have fancy dashboards that say, oh, we have higher turnover in this region or this by this manager. But really, what do I do with that as HR manager? So I think as AI and machine learning and it becomes smarter over time, as they say, ideally it is providing those actionable recommendations to HR to say, here's what's going on. This is what we would recommend based on what has worked in the past. Again, machine learning, it's going to look at what was done and what results came out of that action. So over time, it's hopefully going to provide ideal recommendations that are relevant. But in the meantime, I think HR can, at a minimum, leverage AI to help with some of the mundane tasks. So right now, Chat GPT is everywhere. It's helping HR write job descriptions or come up with interview questions or make this policy sound prettier. Those are the mundane things I think it really could help with today. But the future, I wish I had a crystal ball because it's just, no.
You don't. I love that you brought up help with interview questions. So my husband was recently going through a promotion process and I was helping him prep as an HR professional does. And I was trying to think through, okay, what questions would I ask him, even though I've never conducted an interview for the role he was going for. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to jump onto ChatGPT. And what I did is I loaded in the job posting. I loaded in his resume. I loaded in the website for the organization that he was going to interview in. And I said, based on all of this information, and knowing that he already meets the minimum requirements of the job, so don't ask me any requirement stuff, like check the box on that one. Provide me 25 interview questions that are either behavioral based, hypotheticals, or competency based, and provide me the criteria and how I should be evaluating the answer. Oh my goodness.
It's mind blowing.
Like,
isn't it?
What it put out, I was like, oh my gosh, I've been in HR 20 years and I could never have created this.
I know.
I was blown away at how helpful it was. What other things are out there when I know I don't necessarily mean something specific, but like as you're looking at the gamut of HCM in totality, what are some other things that you're starting to see pop up or kind of get into that you're like, oh, I can't wait to see that come to life a little bit more?
Yeah, I think the employee facing, for lack of a better term, the chatbots are getting a lot fancier.
Yeah.
It used to just be employee ask a question and chatbot just goes and finds the answer. But now those chatbots leveraging ChatGPT, it's just getting more interactive.
Yeah.
It like you're actually having a conversation with a real person. So employees can now say, what's my PTO policy and can you help me submit this? And, on the benefit side, does my plan cover this procedure? And it's just taking the chatbots to the next level, which helps take some of that off of HR's plate to be able to address those very basic questions. But when the questions get elevated, obviously, should get routed to HR. The other cool thing is in the learning and development process, how, chatbots, again, employees asking a lot of questions about XYZ skill or how do I advance in my career? And then the AI in the background's looking at it going, oh, based on all these questions you're asking, we would recommend you sign up for this learning path or you aim for this, senior level position. So that's pretty cool.
I'm excited to see what's going to happen in that space, especially if, like you said, all these HCMs have all this data, right? So if you're an employee and so it knows your performance, right? It knows what is said in your performance review. It knows what is in your LMS. It knows what potentially your next step should be based on career pathing, right? And it says, hey, based on all of these pieces of data, I don't see anything in your role right now where you're demonstrating this skill. Here's some classes to take to upskill yourself to be ready for the next role.
And then it potentially develops some micro-learning little things to just kind of gauge the employee's interest in it. That really is the missing piece. And at smaller companies, 50 lives, 100 lives, it's easier for managers and teams to deliver that real-time feedback. But when you're talking thousands of employees, it's just not realistic to meet those employees where they're at every single day. So if they can kind of do a lot of that on their own, again, at some point you need a good manager to reinforce that learning curriculum or those goals and have those conversations with the employee, but the AI will help sort of bridge that gap.
For sure. So as we wrap up our conversation, what is one piece of advice that if you could have every HR professional do this as they go into this process that you would leave them with?
Find a consultant to help you.
I love that.
Well, and it's not like I'm, putting a plug for my company or anything, but I just can't imagine if I were in their seat going into this. Now, I do talk to some HR professionals and they're like, oh, I've been through 10 implementations.
Yeah. They
could probably teach me a thing or two. But then I'll talk to the very green HR administrator. And if I wasn't sitting there, they would just, I don't know. So in the absence of having a consultant, I would say just be very strategic about the process. So have a plan. It's not really one piece of advice, but it would be, if you're looking at the market, start with big picture and then work your way to a granular level of analysis, meaning how big is your company? First, start with all of the vendors that are aiming for your target market. What's your budget? You got to set a budget at the beginning. The last thing you want to do is look at something that you it's not in your budget.
Yeah.
So that helps you narrow it down. Now we're looking at like 50, started with 50 vendors. Now we're down to 20, then keep narrowing it down to just look at the top 2 or 3 solutions. Any more than that, we feel you just get analysis paralysis.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can't sit through that many demos and remember which tool did what.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I absolutely love that. Thank you for sitting down with me and having this conversation.
I love this. Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. You can find show notes and links at thehrmixtape.com. Come back often and please subscribe, rate, and review.